All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. Welcome to the CobbleStone Software Tips and Tricks event, Optimize CobbleStone Contract Management. My name is Tyler Holzer. I'm the training manager at CobbleStone Software. I'm going to be leading this event today. Today, we're going to be exploring numerous tips and tricks in CobbleStone Contract Insight. Our panelists are going to highlight some tips for configuration, advice, best practices, nuanced features, out-of-the-box use cases, and more. Kind of anything we think that you should know to more effectively utilize CobbleStone Contract Insight. We have a few different panelists. They're going to be exploring a few different areas of the system. Sure, I don't necessarily expect you're going to be using every single feature we talk about today, every little tip and trick, but if you take one little great nugget of information away from today, I'd consider that a win. Anything to, help streamline your contract management using CobbleStone Contract Insight. Okay. Now, we have four panelists, like I mentioned, we'll get to in a moment. But for everyone that's joining the event today, we would like some active engagement and some Q&A throughout. And here's how that's going to work. There is like a Q&A part of this meeting here. You could access up at the top. Feel free to click the Q&A button and ask questions. And those of us that aren't actively presenting, we could answer. Even folks who are on the call who aren't panelists, feel free to answer the questions, right? All the questions can go to everyone. We have lots and lots of clients here using CobbleStone Contract Insight. So like everyone, please feel free to answer. Just totally fine. I'll certainly be answering the questions too in the background, but still, if you have questions for the panelists, please just raise a hand. We have a good amount of people on today, so we'll let the panelists kind of call on you to ask the question, if that works for you. So Q&A and raise your hand to ask questions. We're going to follow up after this with a recording of the event. So I'm going to send that out to everyone who registered for the event. We'll probably also put it on our YouTube channel, and I'll send the direct link to the YouTube channel. If you're not speaking, please try to keep your mics muted just to keep some background noise to a minimum. But, as you have questions and you're called on, please feel free to unmute, of course. And yeah, so that's it for the introductions. I just want to move on to introduce our panelists quickly. First, we'll have Nash DeVita. Nash is a user of CobbleStone from Iridium Satellite. He's Iridium's contract manager. Avonda Anderson is from Supplier Link. She's the founder of the organization and is a CobbleStone partner. Michael Donnelly is from CobbleStone, and he is an account manager of about 9 years, right, Mike? So a very senior member of CobbleStone and very, very knowledgeable of the system. I want to include at least one kind of senior CobbleStone resource today. And then Ron Fallett's from Alpac Polyester USA, and is the intellectual property manager. So these are our panelists for today, in addition to myself. And this is the agenda for the day. Nash is going to cover a series of workflow tips and tricks. That will be, in each of these panelists, presentations about 10 minutes. Avonda is going to cover leveraging CobbleStone for effective supplier relationship management. Mike Donnelly is going to review vendor registration and the vendor client gateway. And Ron is going to cover a collection of other miscellaneous tips and tricks. And at the end, we'll have, depending on how much time we have, I'm allotting about 15 minutes for an open discussion and Q&A. So at the end, if there's any other questions that you have, other tips that you want to share quickly, we could certainly talk about that at the end of the call in that 15-minute window. Okay, you can ask questions to the panelists, to each other, to me, whomever, but we could just chat at the end with whatever you'd like to. Okay. Before we get started, are there any other questions, comments, feedback, anything like that before I pass over to Nash? All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining once again, and over to you, Nash.
Thanks so much, Tyler. Appreciate it. I'm going ahead and sharing my screen now. Wonderful. All right. So I want to talk about a real passion of mine, and that is workflow inside Contract Insight. We use some pretty intense workflow here at Iridium Satellite as we have multiple lines of business that wind up running some fairly complex items. And what we're looking at right now is this is just the base approval matrix for every item, every contract that we run through. Now, this is focused mainly on the procurement team. However, government is a little different, and then our commercial sales is completely different from that. So we've got a lot of balls in the air. One of the things that my executives and my leadership had asked when we originally put this together was, hey, Nash, if I have an approval task, why am I getting a signing task as well? Can we make those one thing? And yes, absolutely, we could. It wasn't the easiest thing in the world, but I made it happen. So we can have variable signers. And I want to talk about kind of how we do that and the ideas, the concepts, and some tips to embrace to really make it work for you. So please note, before I dive in too much further, what I'm talking about right now with the approval matrix, we do have some technical configuration as we had paid for our system from CobbleStone software. So not all of this will be, right out of the box, but it's amazing. So the first thing I did was I start with 3 different approval process fields: procurement, commercial sales, and government sales. That way I can drive whatever needs to appear, and I'm only using those. So I can make the field procurement approval process display based solely on conditional field settings. So do not hesitate to use those. Use your conditional fields. So in this, if it's procurement or procurement sensitive or HR, it's going to go through the procurement approval process. The others might have to pick something a little different. And here we see the same thing. These fields also display based on the department selected and through our conditional field settings. Now these first 3, we set these values on the employee record. This is a major part of the technical configuration. We have employee information coming down onto the contract. So we've set these approvers up on each individual employee record. Our finance types approvers are set up as default values right in the field manager, so we can default those in every time. And then the signatory. I've set this up to pull a list of all of our users. So now I can have a variable signatory and still have the approval task go out to that appropriate person. So I can set this ad hoc rather than having a set value. We also dig into a little bit of technical configuration here as well. We have a configuration to aggregate our various dollar values, so the actual contract value. And because we do so much with government work, we also have our contract funding. So my note here just says this is established from a base agreement and then all related amendments with the base agreement selected as its parent. Again, technical config. I'm not going to go down into the weeds on that one too terribly much. Now, help save your sanity. Workflow folders are relatively new. I fell in love with them swiftly, and I think we're going to see why. I mean, you can already see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different folders here, each containing at least half a dozen or so workflows, if not more. Now, I don't expect you to learn what Iridium does or how we process all of our tasks, but it's the way I went about it that really helps it work. Now, we're only going to be looking at the procurement approval flows very, very briefly, again, high level, just so you can understand a good mindset to get into. Now, I'm going to go through a real, short list of everything, but what we're going to look at again is these are my procurement agreement workflow tasks. This is just the one folder. As you can see, as I noted, there are 61 different general procurement only approval tasks. 61. Now, I'm sure that seems absurd. However, if we take a look at something like these, we can see that I've broken it down. And let's start looking at each of these names. So I started with procurement workflow. Now, this naming convention started prior to folders, but I still highly recommend it. By keeping an initial opening like mine of procurement workflow 2.0, 3.0, 3.1, 3.1s, et cetera, I know the relationship. I know the order that these tasks will fire. I have descriptions in there in approval process for whom and what kind of agreement. Is it a child or amendment or a parent, a base SAL task order, whatever you might have where we're getting the approval for values, or even master agreements where there's no dollar value. So you see anything that's greater than $1 million, that's one level. 501,000 to $1 million, that's another level. And then $0 to $500,000 is a basic level. We can see again, these are all procurement workflow, numbered, so I know their way they're firing. I'm working strictly with the approval processes while the agreement is in the approval process, some of my conditions, and then the type of agreement. Additionally, over here, you can see I've got child plus SIG and parent plus SIG. Again, this naming goes so far, and I can't recommend it enough. Because my executives, my leadership didn't want to approve two tasks, one to approve and one to sign, we got to combine them. So I have a different version here, one that's just the parent, one where the parent and the signer, where the executive is the same person. So be sure to consider your needs. Be sure to consider the possibilities. Think outside the box. My number one piece of advice, if you're ever working with a workflow, run that is more than just a handful of steps, I highly advise illustrating it before you actually build in the system. Plan your work and then work your plan. I've used illustrations, I've used lists, I've used Excel, I use pen and paper, I've used Visio. Making sure you know what you're going into and how you're moving through them before building is certainly an important idea. You don't want one task firing at the wrong time. You don't want a task stepping on another one's toes, if you will. So make sure you have a solid naming convention. And I think one of the bigger things that I have here is don't be afraid. Workflow can make everything so smooth, or it can make it messy, depending on how afraid you are of the system and your ability to grapple with it. So if we take a look at what I've got on screen presently, I've got a couple of workflow configuration screens from their conditions tabs. If you take a look, many of these conditions are not directly out of the box. I had to modify most of these. If we take a look at status, okay, well, status is pending, status ID equals 40. Great, very normal. Or the contract value is between $1 and $500,000. As I mentioned, the lowest level of approval rather. But then we see procurement approval process equal signatory is the director. I've got multiple values in here. This is all done through some very basic SQL statement writing. If you're not comfortable with SQL, I completely understand. I wasn't comfortable with SQL at first either, despite having a very distant coding background. Dig in or talk to somebody who does have some SQL knowledge. All you're doing is working with a database here, so you can make it work for you. And being able to, I think, really spread the way you're doing things to make a flow, kind of like this one, it winds up being unbelievably smooth for the end user. Yes, there was a heavy lift for me as a system administrator, But my end users will see something like we have on screen now. I have 2 tasks, one to create and ready it, and one to send it for signature via DocuSign. Everything else flows perfectly, and this is how it will look almost every single time. There might be a couple more approvals, there might be a couple fewer, but this is the gist of it. So by working with that creativity, by mapping everything out and not being afraid, the results can be worth it. You can wind up with a system that's this clean, and your front end users will never know the complexity. It's magic. It winds up becoming magic to most of them. So my biggest tip: organization, preparation, and planning. So I'm always happy to talk workflow. If anyone has any questions, I'll certainly be happy to answer. Tyler, I don't know if you want that at the end of the session, but please just feel free to hit me with a message in chat or after we can talk as a group. So thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Nash. Are there any questions? Don't mind doing a quick Q&A if there are any direct questions for Nash. Okay. Well, if anything does come up, please feel free to put it in the chat, or we could circle back to those questions at the end.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay. Next, we're going to pass over to Avanda with leveraging CobbleStone for effective supplier relationship management.
Alrighty. So, hi everyone. My name is Avanda Anderson, and I am a CobbleStone partner. I can't find my slides. I shared them and now I can't find them, so my bad. Let me see. Give me 1 second. Let me do this again. I see it on the screen, but that is not. It's not allowing me to control. So just bear with me 1 second. And we did practice, believe it or not. But my name is Avanda Anderson, and I'm super excited to be here today with you to talk to you a little bit about leveraging CobbleStone for. Tyler, can you pull up my slides? I'm sorry, I can't get it to work on my end to allow me to flip through for whatever reason. It's just not giving me the option.
You got it.
Thank you. Let me stop sharing.
Hang with me just a moment. I have it up. Just tell me when you want me to flick slides, and I will.
Yeah. Okay, great. All right, there we go. Thank you all for joining us today for leveraging CobbleStone for contract insights for effective supplier relationship management, or SRM. So again, my name is Avanda Anderson, and I am the founder of Supplier Link, and we are a partner of CobbleStone. My firm provides data analytics around supplier relationship management, and we help companies do that with contract management, negotiations, and amongst other things. And so I'm looking forward to sharing you some tips and tricks around how contract insights can help you with your supplier relationship management for enhancing efficiency, transparency, and also risk management by having these insights to your availability. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So again, today we're going to briefly explore how CobbleStone Contract Insights can enhance your SRM. We're going to do a quick overview of key SRM features and benefits of using CobbleStone for SRM. I'm going to talk to you about a couple of real world use cases with past companies that I personally work for where I used CobbleStone as a user and practitioner, and then how carry forward into using it with my new clients or anyone that's looking for a CLM. So overview of CobbleStone Contract Insights. I'm sure you all know, but it's a comprehensive contract management software designed to streamline your contract lifecycle management. And the core capabilities is around contract creation, authoring, automated workflows, as Nash just talked about, contract data management, and reporting analytics, all key for effective, transparent supplier relationship management. And how they go hand in hand is that without, you get the contract loaded in, but then what happens, right? How do you really manage that contract with the supplier? And that's through SRM or supplier relationship, and mitigating risk around, compliance, or making sure that you have the right, visibility into what's coming up for renewal. Do you want a renewal, offboarding, and closing out contracts? All of that is key for effective SRM. Next. And so some of the key features around SRM, of course, the centralized repository, and that is exactly what CobbleStone is great for. Many companies do not have a really good way of centralizing the supplier data. First and foremost, they're using some ERP system if they're not using a CobbleStone. And what I found is that data is spread across different systems. It's very complex. Even as Nash brought about, you have all these different approvals, all these touch points, and it needs to be centralized. So CobbleStone will help do that, giving you greater visibility into, one, your supply base, but then also what do you have available to you from contract standpoint, and making sure that you're not missing contracts, because from a study that recently just got conducted, 70% of the participants couldn't find 10% of their contracts, which hold 80 to 90% of your revenue. So it's super important to have this centralized repository, and making it possible for you to do performance reviews and follow up with your suppliers if there's any type of risk that could occur from a contract standpoint. Automation and alerts is a big one. Knowing when there's contract due. Being a former practitioner, I was in procurement for 12 years, and working across the companies that I worked with, a lot of times we would just get a contract and it was due yesterday, right? Or it was, post the deadline, and now we're rushing to try to get this contract renewed or get a new contract put in place. So the alerts feature is really key to making sure you're managing that supplier relationship. You can get to them 60, 90 days out, set a cadence for that, have the conversations about renewal, negotiations, all of that in a timely fashion to ensure that you're getting your contracts correctly processed. The third thing is supplier performance tracking. Again, this is key for SRM, so that you can understand what KPIs that you have set up for your supplier. Did they miss any SLAs? Did they have any incidents? Do you have a service credit you need to go after? CobbleStone is great for making sure that supplier performance is tracked and monitored to evaluate the supplier against the KPIs. And then lastly, the integrated capabilities, similar to what Nash was talking about, seamlessly integrating with ERP systems like NetSuite, Oracle, any of those big ERPs for data synchronization. This again is key, because as you're getting the contract onboarded, what happens, right? As the invoices come in, how are you knowing what's left? How do you know are you over utilizing your contract? Has your contract lost its value, which 40% is lost in most agreements due to tailspin and different things like that. So having a tool like CobbleStone definitely helps you with that SRM management 100%. Next. And so benefits of using CobbleStone, I'll just run through these. Enhanced efficiency, of course, we talked about that. Improved transparency. You gain visibility into your supplier performance and the contract status. This is key for those business owners or procurement managers that have a lot of suppliers that they're managing. Having it centralized to CobbleStone allows them to get quick visibility on what they need to work on instead of trying to tackle everything. Maybe I'll just focus on the contracts that are coming due in the next 30 days, 60 days, or 90 days, etc. Risk mitigation is huge, because proactively identifying and managing supplier risk through contract, right? Again, are we out of compliance? Did this contract expire? Did we offboard it? And all of those things. That's going to be key for mitigating any type of risk around supplier relationships, and making sure that you have that centralized. The CobbleStone is going to be key for you through that automation. Better decision making, of course, when you have insights and you can understand your data, you can make better informed decisions, and that is what CobbleStone allows you to do. And lastly, compliance, right? We want to make sure that we are offboarding contracts when they're offboarded, and we're renewing contracts when they're renewing. And then any new contracts that are onboarded are getting done in a way that you can continue to track and monitor that supplier performance for any type of contractual obligations or any regulatory requirements that you need to track. Next. And so just really quickly, real world use case. I was working at Autodesk, a huge software company, and I was a vendor manager at the time. And when I worked at Autodesk, we were able to reduce our contract processing time. I think it was around 20, maybe 30% by just using automated workflows, as Nash just showed us. So it really does help you with your procurement lifecycle management as well when you're have this type of efficiency improvement. And then as far as performance monitoring real time, also at Autodesk, we were able to improve our supplier negotiations through regular performance tracking. We had SLAs baked in our most strategic contracts, of course. So we were able to track those SLAs, and when they were missed, we were able to immediately go after our service target, our service credits, and we didn't have to think about it. Everything was right there at our fingertips. So CobbleStone really helped us with monitoring and managing the performance of our suppliers with this automated and centralized platform. And next. And really quickly, implementation. So for SRM, this is how you will want to implement it. You want to do an initial assessment, of course, evaluate your current supplier management processes, and then identify the areas that you need for improvement. And that's either through communication, outreach, or whatever. You want to do some customization to configure, CobbleStone to your specific SRM, requirement. Not just looking at contract management, but how are you going to manage the relationship with the supplier while you have the contract active? Third is data migration. Import your existing supplier data, contracts into CobbleStone, all of that, of course, but it's key to make sure that everything gets into CobbleStone. Nothing is saved on a desktop or anything to maximize efficiency. Fourth, training and onboarding. This is key. You need to create some type of SOP, some standard documentation of how you go about, using CobbleStone for SRM. This goes into just contract management itself, but primarily around how are you going to manage? Is it going to be a quarterly business review? Those type of things is what you want to make sure, and you need to train your business and team to meet those cadences. And lastly, continuous improvement. Regularly review and optimize your SRM processes using CobbleStone analytics. And that is the beauty of it, because you have all of these insights at your fingertips. You can slice and dice that information. You can see contracts that are coming due. You can see new contracts that have been onboarded. You can really get ahead and start planning with your business as a procurement practitioner and get in front of contracts before they go off the rails. So, and then lastly, the next slide. And that's it. So Q&A, if you have any questions, please. Again, my name is Vonda Anderson, the founder of Supplier Link. Again, if you need help with your SRM, any more tips and tricks that CobbleStone, I can help you show that CobbleStone can work for you, happy to reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can go straight to my website at supplierlink.com and reach out to me there. But thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Avonda. Do we have any direct questions for Avonda? Please feel free to unmute and ask if you have any, or put them in the chat, whatever you prefer.
Thank you all for the claps.
Thank you so very much. All right. Next, we're going to continue with Michael Donnelly with vendor registration and the vendor client gateway. Mike, you could take it away whenever you're ready.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Tyler. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. As Tyler mentioned, I'm Mike Donnelly. I work here at CobbleStone. So for my portion of the call, I will be in my demonstration system live. So a little different than the previous topics that we covered. But like Tyler just mentioned, I'll be covering the vendor registration as well as a little bit later an overview of the vendor client collaboration gateway, which some of you may not have. It is an add-on module that we offer. So if what you see today kind of piques your interest, I would certainly reach out to your account manager to discuss a little bit further. But I'll start sharing my screen. And first, let's just get an idea of what registration could look like. So a very common question that we get on demonstrations when it comes to this tool is how do third parties access the gateway? And it's really simply a matter of having a link on your website or somewhere accessible. So for an example, recently we are working with a healthcare organization who has physicians go to their website and join their network. So previously what they had done was that join their network button just simply provided a download of an Excel spreadsheet of essentially an onboarding form to just fill in the data. That is now going to be transitioning into a more online registration form that we can take a look at least at a high level for today. So this is going to be the landing page of my gateway here. This is a configurable landing page. If you wanted to add imagery, you can add some additional information on exactly how to use this gateway. But if I am just a third party, I may have never worked with your organization before, I come to your website and follow a certain link, I can be brought to the screen, and ultimately I can also create an account. So we're going to go through that today. Now, when creating an account, we're probably going to be seeing a lot of similarities between what we're about to see today versus what we're very used to in the system. And the first step that I'll be taking as a third party is defining the type of company I am. So this is going to be a configurable list. You can choose whichever one you want to have available to your third parties. For today, we're going to choose customer. Now, as far as field management is concerned and just the general layout of these registration pages, it's going to be almost identical to an internal configuration of your companies and fields by type, etc. So I have a very basic form right here in front of us that we're going to be filling out. And I'll try to make a company that doesn't exist in my system yet. And just like normal, we can define exactly what fields they need to be filling in, the types of fields, the required fields, etc. When it comes to tax ID in particular, something that we hear often is the being able to avoid duplicates in the system. And in case you are not aware, when it comes to fields, you can set them as unique. So in that case, if a company were to try to register, put in their tax ID that's already within your system, it would be essentially stopped right there and just provided with that information. But we're going to go ahead and just plug in some basic data here. I'll stick with the required field just in the interest of time. So first I'll be plugging in the company information, and then I'll be putting information about myself as the third-party main contact. And once we save here, I have to come up with a different username. But once we save here, really that's all that the third party really needs to be doing, just because immediately after the person saves that page, we can now flip back into the internal system. So for what a user would see, and let's just refresh my company list. We'll scroll down towards the Z's, and we're going to be seeing ZZ Company, the one that I just added a moment ago. Now, something that's absolutely worthy of note is just because a company were to register on your gateway, that doesn't necessarily mean that they can start working with you immediately. You can start pulling up contracts with them immediately. There does need to be at least one action taken. And a lot of companies take this as an opportunity to really automate their vendor onboarding process within their system. So what I'm referencing here is they are not an active company just yet, so I can't assign them to any contracts. So let's just dive into this particular company record here. And if we scroll down to the task section, I have just a very tiny example of what potentially could occur after registration was completed. So I have a very vague task here: complete due diligence check for vendor. This could really be any process that you would like to follow when it comes to that onboarding procedure. But ultimately, the goal here is to get this company activated. So let's imagine we've gone through some workflow processes. I'll stick with just editing of a field up here. But we are going to flip this to an active company. You can have this happen automatically as well through workflow if necessary. And then ultimately after this, you would be able to start adding contracts associated with this company. Now, that what we went through is actually going to be available out of the box, the registration piece. But when it comes to the gateway as a whole, the registration piece is the only thing available to companies who do not move forward with the actual module. So let's shift gears here and talk about the module itself. So worthy of note, that it is an additional purchase. So if you're not already using this, you would need to connect with your account manager. But let's change gears. We'll flip back over to my gateway here, and I'll log in as a different company than the one we just registered as, just so we can get a little bit more of an idea of an established company who's been using the gateway. And we're going to be seeing a lot of consistencies between what we see here on the gateway versus what you're probably used to within the internal system. Because once we've logged in, the first thing that we'll see, just like you would normally, is going to be a dashboard. And bear with me while my internet loads here, but we are going to be able to build dashboards for counterparties to just help out with the navigation of the gateway overall. And while that's loading, let's flip to my other tab here, and let's just get to a contract record. Because the reason I wanted to get to this contract record is the company that I have assigned to this contract record is the company that just logged into the gateway. And we have a field here called collaboration type. This is going to be an out-of-the-box field. You can rename this if necessary. And what this displays here is really going to influence how vendors on the gateway could potentially access this contract if you so choose. If it's internal like the one in front of us, it's inaccessible. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to edit this to be a gateway file or gateway contract. That way, Donnelly Associates here will be able to access it and save that record. And now once we flip back to the gateway here, the dashboard is loaded. We can see a very light idea of a dashboard here with tiles. That's primarily what I focused on when it comes to this dashboard, as well as a list of the contracts that I have with the users, with the company. So let's follow the My Contracts link here. And right on the top here, we see WR Consulting, which is the contract record that I just added or edited internally. And if we dive into that, we can see what I like to call it like a light version of the contract record. As we can probably quickly tell, there's much less fields displayed here than there would be internally. That's because as the user, you're going to be able to identify what fields you would like to have displayed on the vendor for your, or on the gateway for your vendors, and the ones that should remain internal. We can go one next step further with that idea and define which fields we would like to potentially be editable by the vendor. So this is where that collaboration piece really comes into play, the ability to actually edit fields within the contract record. And if we scroll down, I didn't expect to be adding any surveys to this contract today, but we are going to be able to add surveys in the event that we wanted to just ask a questionnaire to the vendor or to the customer. And arguably the most important section of this page here is going to be the files and attachment section. So the same kind of rules apply here as they would internal. We offer unlimited storage for the gateway, but in this case, the vendor is going to be the one who can potentially upload a file. So a few different examples of why this might be useful. A turn of a contract. If you would like them to just simply upload that file directly to the contract record as opposed to going through email and it potentially being missed, the option is here for you. And this same kind of files and attachment section also appears on the company's profile. So in the event that you would like them to directly upload their certificates of insurance or W-9s or really any other more company specific information, you easily can allow them to do so on the gateway. They can also add notes and comments, which are going to appear on the contract record. And then right below that, we actually have an example of a subtable. So I have an amendment subtable here, but if we flip back to the user perspective, we will be seeing a very similar subtable, or really the same subtable right in front of us internally as well. So if you're leveraging subtables, you can also make them gateway facing and interactable by a vendor. That way, if you have timetables or amendments, for example, or really just anything that you can think that you would like the vendor to be adding into piecemeal, you easily can do so here. So the gateway is a really great way to just kind of provide a little bit more freedom to your users while also giving that freedom to your vendors and have that true shared space between yourself and the third party, just so that email can be not the only method that you go back and forth. Now, when the gateway is just standalone, contracts are going to be the main thing that it's going to be offering, that collaboration of contracts. But also out of the box with the gateway is going to be things like request management. So you can have vendors actually request contracts through the gateway as well. And if you're leveraging other modules, not included with this one, solicitation management, purchase order management, that's also going to be able to be interacted with by a vendor on the gateway. One last thing I wanted to touch on before passing it over back to Tyler is a different approach to this same kind of idea of getting information out there to third parties. So for those of you on the call who have to adhere to FOIA compliance, we also offer a different approach to this same kind of idea, and that's going to be our public access portal. Now, the public access portal, I'll show you an example in just a second. I will say that it is not truly interactable by a vendor, but it still allows this same kind of transparency to be provided to those vendors or third parties. I have an example right here. This is a current client of ours, Vita, and this is their public access portal. So I didn't have to register. I don't have to sign up or do really anything at all. I just have to come to this URL. Once again, it could be just a link on our website, and I can go ahead and start searching for contracts that this company might have. So let's go ahead and search Afton with Vita, and it's going to provide me with search results pages with different columns, very similar like the internal display. And if we view that directly, we get a little bit more intricate detail about this contract. This is a really great way to just simply have that public-facing list of contracts for transparency purposes. So I would say this is more applicable to, government, education, anyone who needs to follow that FOIA compliance. But that is what I was planning to cover on today's call. So I very much appreciate everyone's time this afternoon. And at this point, Tyler, I'll pass it back over to you.
All right. Thank you, Mike. Do we have any questions for Mike? Anyone on vendor registration and the gateway, the public portal? Okay. If no questions, as always, please feel free to put them in the chat. We're going to keep moving on ahead. I'm going to pass over to our last panelist, Ron Fallett. Ron, feel free to take it away whenever you're ready.
Sure. Hello, everyone. I am going to be covering some of the stuff that Nash talked about. My presentation is geared more towards general use of the system. Some of the tools that I've had, as I mentioned, Nash mentioned earlier, but I don't know if I copied it from him or if we independently developed them, but I'm going to go with probably both. One of the things I think is really important is that we use those dashboards as much as possible. These dashboards can be integral in helping you monitor and disseminate work. We can determine, and you can see right here is a screenshot. I captured my dashboard. I have, hyperlinks here to do quick access. Add contract request or what have you. I track my trademark list and patent list here. So I have a dashboard for my trademarks and patents. Down below the second line, I have a legal team here, which we assign work to, and I can determine, who's in need of, if I have work that needs to be assigned, I could say, well, this person is light, or this person's overworked, or what have you. I also have a second row here for statuses that are in a particular records that are in sent for signatures, and then also auditing records. So this, I think, dashboards are a huge help if you're not using them, not only for hyperlinks to get your internal users to go to the right hyperlink instead of clicking on a link and then another link to get to where you need to go. You can just hit one little bar here, if you will. And so I think it's really helpful for getting through the system and working efficiently, and then working through who has equal workload. That being said, let's see. Sorry. Going down to my next, I don't have slides here. When you're working with your fields, I like to group my fields into general categories. So we have a general information category, and in this case, it's a test record, but it has some of the general information about the contract type that it is. And I do the same thing for request. And then I have internal details, and this covers stuff that maybe only the internal people would need to know about the contract, what department it is, what have you. And then I segregate it into contract details. This could be like a summary sheet of your contract. This one is for a CDA, so we have disclosure period and what have you. Other ones could be like sales or purchasing information about maybe termination dates or what have you. And then one of the things that you'll notice with my categories is that they're numbered. And I find that the numbering system is huge help to organizing and naming specific sections, but we also go into different types. And Nash touched on this one is workflows, but typically I label and number all my types of agreements in a particular manner so that I don't have to worry about trying to find them in alphabetical order. I can put them in numerical order, and then I know where to look for them so that I can either modify them or select them. Same thing works for statuses. I use statuses, and the numbering system allows me to follow the progression of a contract. So we start out as inactive or user hold, and we move all the way through review, different types of reviews, and then active statuses and different types of active statuses. And these different types of active statuses, if we were to alphabeticalize this, active would be first, and send for signatures would be towards the last. But now I can see them in order of progression that makes sense for me. I also use them in templates. I group templates according to particular numbers so that I know which template lies where, and I can put them in particular order, and I can determine who can use what template. Utilizing something that Nash said, naming conventions are very important also. And then moving further into utilization of the naming convention, we're seeing the use of the numbering in the email templates. Another thing about email templates is that there is actual templates that you can use. And I typically do this for repetitive notes. So you'll see here, you can, if you say something over and over and over again, you utilize these templates to be able to repeat your statement so you don't have to re-say it a bunch of different times. Many times if people are used to seeing the same language, they start knowing what is going to be the content of that email and just look for bolded letters to see what differentiates this audit from other audits. And if you don't know how to get there, I will bring up a test record and show you how to get to your templates. If you go to your email section, your templates are collected right here. You can either pick a template, and I use the naming convention there also, or you can click on the gear icon and you can either make them or you can view and manage them. But that is all I have for my presentation. I was going for more of a Q&A if anybody needs to go through my system to see how it works. But if it's self-explanatory, I'm happy you guys learned something.
Thanks, Ron. That was super helpful as like an overview of some general tips in your system. That's excellent. Do we have any other questions for Ron? Anyone? Please feel free. But okay. If not, I'll just take over and move over to the general Q&A for today. Let me just first pass it to well, everyone else on the call. Do we have any other like open questions for the panelists or anyone else, like any tips, tricks you want to share, please feel free. Okay. If not, I have two questions. This, I suppose, is more geared toward of the panelists for Ron and for Nash, but any of the attendees can please feel free to answer if you'd like. I'm curious. Some organizations that I work with sometimes struggle to get their users, like their end users, day-to-day folks, to like adopt and really use the system. What are your experiences with that? And do you have any like tips to improve like your user knowledge and your end user adoption of CobbleStone?
I'll see if Nash has something to say, but I know that there is I'm trying to find it in my system. I set up something in my test system and I haven't implemented it yet, but there is a way that you can do training sessions in CobbleStone, and I'm at a loss right now. I'm not prepared to discuss it. So let me look for it, and if Nash has something to say, you may be able to shed light on it.
So adoption has not been too big of an issue for us. As soon as a new member of the leadership staff comes onto the company, I've registered them into the system, move them through there. So there's usually not a lot of hiccups. When I'm doing that, I send an email that says, "Hey, welcome to CobbleStone." Yeah, not at CobbleStone. "Welcome to Iridium. I know you have a lot going on, but I've got something to add. Just need to, set you up with this. Take a look at these training." Now, I've recorded a handful of training videos, though Tyler's and the rest of the CobbleStone's team their training is amazing. I made some specific to our uses. They're like 4 or 5 minute videos, and it gives the basics. And I have had very, very few issues with that sort of approach, with bringing people in, proactively sending them the information, and going, "Hey, let me know if you're in or not."
Okay,
Perfect.
while Nash was talking, I was able to find what I was looking for. I have this in a pre-set up link. It's under decision trees. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
So it's under decision trees, and so like contract formation. If people needed help with contract formation, they can come in here and they could see the process that I'm looking for them to produce or to follow. And if it says yes, they say, then is a request made for a contract? And this is specific to ourselves. So, you can just take it for what it's worth, but we'll go forward. So if we say no, and then it says, "All right, please make a contract request," and it'll give you a jump to the add a contract request screen. Now, the link might have been different because it might take a little bit of time because of a transition that we just did from different servers, but I have to update it. But moving back, you can go back to that. Sorry. Let me go back to where I was at. Nope, I want this. Sorry about that. I don't know why my computer is being so slow today. Under my decision trees, going back to contract formation, if there isn't a customer in the vendor gateway, we have a link here to say put the customer in the vendor gateway. Let's see. Decision trees also, how to audit a contract. So if an individual wants to learn how to audit a contract, if we assign a task to somebody to audit him, we could follow this spreadsheet. So they're unsure. Well, here's a list of directions on how to go about doing it. And how to make a signature process. So I have a number of different training opportunities for them to go through. And It's been a while since I worked on this, but I can if anybody's interested in understanding how to make these decision matrices, you can reach out to me separately.
That is awesome, Ron. I have not seen decision matrices used for that. That's great. And by the way, to my question, Tina said in the chat that they have a trainer in legal that meets with the contract manager every few months, and that's how they're, improving, user usage and training in CobbleStone. Does anyone else have any thoughts or comments on that question?
I've got one comment, I guess, and that is adoption looks different for every organization. So if we're talking about adoption and I'm talking about having 400 people in my system, you might not have that need. So make sure that you're weighing that based on your organization's needs and not something that one of us might talk about.
Yep, that is definitely true. Thank you, Nash. With any other questions, comments, tips you want to share from anyone else on the call, please feel free. Okay. Well, if nothing else, let me just give a few closing remarks. First, thank you everyone for joining today once again, and thank you very much to the panelists. This is the first tips and tricks event that we ran at CobbleStone. We're going to hope to run these a little more often on a recurring schedule, maybe once or twice per year. I'll send out a survey to everyone to collect your feedback if you have any. Since it's the first one, I'm especially interested in your feedback on the event to see what you thought about it so we can improve it for the future. We'll be following up with the recording and some other resources, like our learning videos, our group trainings or webinars. You could feel free to leverage going forward. If you have any other questions, please feel free to follow up. You could reach out at training@cobblestonesoftware.com, which is right on the slide right there. Okay. Otherwise, thank you all very much once again, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.